The Rockpile Report, the pettiest, hardest drinking Bills podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Rockpile Report podcast. I am your host, Bills season ticket holder Drew Gear. That's my producer, Chris Kruger. You know, it's kind of funny. When I got out of bed this morning, I was thinking to myself, you know, I've done some work. I've got some topics. We're going to be able to roll out a nice, we're kind of doing a wonky recording schedule this week, but I think I've got a decent amount of news fodder for us to talk about. It's going to run alongside the kickoff of our draft content. And yet, they don't ever really let you down, do they?
No.
See, I want to start with a question for you, Chris. April Fool's Day.
Very important day in my life.
We're sitting here. It's April 3rd. Do you celebrate, first of all?
It's not. I don't celebrate April Fool's Day. What jackasses celebrate it as. It is important to my life because my Aunt Chris, it's her birthday. More importantly, also my brother's birthday, April 1st.
How do you have two family members born on the same day? Like, so generations apart. That's weird.
It's science. You want to know what else?
Science.
Yeah, science. You want to know what else weird? My birthday in July. Also, my aunt and uncle's wedding anniversary.
I don't know what that has to do with anything. That's like me talking about the price of tacos and then you handing me a beer and being like, yeah, but I like beer.
Two birthdays on the same day, April Fool's Day.
The birth of a marriage and the birth of a...
Yeah.
Now, see, I would be mean here and I would go, well, Daryl was born on that day. I mean, look at him. He is the joke. I mean,
yeah.
that's Donna, Mark, that's your joke right there. But honestly, I like Daryl. Daryl, if you're listening to this...
Don't worry, he doesn't.
Shout out to Daryl Kruger. He's actually way cooler and more personable than you are, Chris. I'm gonna level with you. Didn't he always have the bigger friends group?
Yeah, that's not shocking at all. I mean, I'm sure when you talked to him at the wedding, you had plenty to discuss with your fandom of Alabama and the fact that he is a graduate of Auburn.
Oh, I should have hit him with a Roll Tide. So here's a question. April Fool's Day. I love pranks. I love them. How do you feel as an adult when a prank gets played on you?
I mean, it's weird because, again, I'm slightly ahead of you. I don't know how that... I mean, I know how that worked out with parenting because Benton put... He did something yesterday. I think he put toothpaste on the toilet seat the other day. Like I wasn't going to see it. I mean, I didn't...
Classic.
I mean, I didn't go in and use the bathroom, like, right after he did it. But Jessica had said something. Like, I put toothpaste on the... Oh, cool. It's almost like you say it in the same vein as Farva. Awesome prank, Farva. Better than the crap you pull, Mac.
Let me tell you this, though. Pranks are an art form. Like, there's people who are like, oh, no, man, I like a good prank, and it's that kind of nonsense. I am a connoisseur of pranks, and it comes from a really, like you have to be a really bad person in order to be good at it. One of them is, like, there's the low-hanging fruit, right? There's the harmless, the jokey kind of ones where you have a donut, but you have to get the Paula's donuts here in Buffalo because they're so big, right? That when they pump them full of cream, the exit wound from the filler is pretty big. So you can take a small dessert spoon and you can kind of spoon the cream filling out little by little without disrupting the shape of the donut. Then you take a nitrile glove and you pack that full of a mix of minced onion and mayonnaise. And then you cut the fingertip of one of those gloves off and you just pump that right into each one of those donuts. Now you take that to a place that you share with other people, usually like an office somewhere, and you put someone else's name on the box in permanent marker and then put it on the counter in a shared space and just walk away. You're untouchable as long as no one sees you do it. And now there's no traceability back to you. In fact, if anything, it looks like it was a pre-order for somebody else. And now that person is being yelled at about why someone in accounting just got a mouthful of mayonnaise at 8:15 in the morning. Then you have like there's other pranks in that vein, right? Like you take a little bit of the extra strength Oragel. Like I'm going to teach Benny this one. You take a little extra strength Oragel and you just really work it into somebody's toothbrush. It's clear. You're not going to see it. You're just going to go in there like you always do. Put some toothpaste on there. You're going to get that wet and you're going to start scrubbing. And eventually what's going to happen is your whole lower lip and everything down here is just going to go completely numb. And you're going to try to drink coffee and you're going to make an ass out of yourself. Then you take it up a notch. And this is what I think would act. Now, if those happened to you, Chris, what would your reaction be? Like, would it be a visceral, yelling, frustrated, or would you just kind of take it in stride?
No, it's game recognizes game. You just go, I see what you did there, and I appreciate it. And then you move on.
Now, then there's the ones that aren't quite so funny. Like, these are mean. This is like how they talk about, you talk about Super Troopers. Oh, our shenanigans are funny and cheeky. What does he goes? Farmer shenanigans are evil and cruel. Have you ever heard of the chicken noodle shower?
No.
You can do this to a one-person residence, but it's funnier if you can find a place like a college dorm hall to do it in. You take chicken bouillon cubes. If they won't fit, you can break them in half. And you put them in the shower head. Person goes in there, they warm their shower up, and then they step in, and there's just greasy chicken stock water just cascading over them as they stand there. And because it's always in the morning when they get hit with this, because you do it at night,
yeah,
the person's half awake. It takes them a beat to kind of figure out what's happening to them. By then it's too late. Now your hair is greasy, your skin is greasy, and you smell like chicken soup. There's no way to fix that. You're just stuck. Now, knowing how you are about your hair, how would you feel about it at that level?
I mean, I'd be mad that I'd have to wash my hair again. I mean, I'm on a strict regimen for washing my hair as it is, so I wouldn't want to have that disrupted.
It's always funny to find out how people respond to pranks. I have a million of them. And it's just that now I feel bad because as an adult man, there's nobody left for me to prank. I can't prank my coworkers because then that can be seen as abusive once you get into a position of sort of authority. You can't do it at home to your wife because that's how you end up sleeping on the couch and or divorced. And I can't do it to my children because they're too young to really appreciate the humor of getting got. They wouldn't even understand what was happening. And I mean, there's a million pranks. There's a million great ones. All I could think of was my father, who God bless him. It was every year for almost a decade. He fell for this same prank every year. And it's simple. It's the rubber band around the kitchen sprayer. So when you get up in the morning and you go to pour a glass of water for yourself, it's 6:15 in the morning, you're half awake. You turn the water on and it immediately just sprays out of the hose and it just gets you. And now you're wet and you're cold. And every year, his reaction was so viscerally negative. And yet, at the same time, he wouldn't commit to memory the fact that we were going to do it again.
I think that's changed over the depending on newer homes.
Well, yeah, so now those sprayers are gone.
It's literally attached to the faucet, and you pull the faucet out.
Yeah.
So
it's gone.
Yeah, whoever...
A great prank ruined.
I can only imagine that it must have happened 10 to 15 years ago. Somebody at Moen interviewed for a job, and that was their whole job pitch. This is how I'm going to change things at Moen. Oh, we're going to revolutionize the way sinks are built because
no one will ever get pranked again.
We're going to eliminate the prank of taping the faucet sprayer. Because we're just going to combine it. And all you got to do is press a button on top, and that eliminates that prank. I'm sure that happened.
That's the pitch?
We'd have to ask Iman, because he would. He
knows every weird marketing thing that ever existed. And then there's the things that you do that are just, in true Farva fashion, that are just evil. Things that are just cruel, and you call them a prank, but they're not. Case in point, I'm not going to name names because some people may be listening to this who know the individuals involved. There was a person when we were in high school who was cheating on their girlfriend. He had been mean to me previously when I was huskier, and he was cheating on his girlfriend. His car was in an area of town where you were likely to drive past it if you were on your way to school. And he was parked in her driveway, the girl that he was cheating on his then girlfriend with. And when your school from 7th grade to 12th grade is 300 kids, word's going to travel pretty quickly if something, Letterkenny, bad gas travels fast in a small town.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you see this as you're driving through town at night, and you say, it would be really funny. And you go home and you get some tools, and you come back and you steal that person's car battery. Now, I call that a prank. Other people might argue and say that it's petty theft. Some people some people would qualify that as a lot of things.
That is an excellent prank.
That's a prank where I come from. There was the time a friend of mine, Gary Monica, hit me with an egg when I didn't see it coming. While we were at a friend's house watching a Bills-Dolphins game. So when I was in the bathroom washing the egg out of my hair, I saw a small bottle of I'll never forget it, VO5 shampoo. And then what I did was I essentially encouraged everybody that at halftime we were going to go outside and do something. And I was like, all right, guys, the first person to get to wherever, wins. And I got everybody all revved up about this idea. And then as everybody else ran off, I tripped Gary to the ground and basically held him down and just poured that shampoo into his face. And held him down, and there was nobody to help him because I had separated him from the group. I call that a prank. Some people call that malicious behavior, vindictive, if you will. I don't know. All I know is that pranks are hilarious, and I've reached a point in my life where I've found I can't really do these types of things to anyone without actual repercussions. And I don't know why, but that makes me sad. It just really makes me sad. I don't know if that says something about me as a person. I guess maybe I need to develop more low-impact April Fool's Day pranks. If there's anybody out there who has any they'd like to share, at Rockpile Report on Twitter, rockpilereport716@gmail.com. Please enlighten me as to some low-impact pranks that maybe I can get myself back in the game and feel better about this. Now, the reason I bring this up is because I couldn't help feeling as I was sitting at work today as if I kept checking the calendar being like, is it really the 3rd though? Because this can't be real. This news, these tweets that I'm seeing, none of this can actually be real life. It's the April Fool's joke that I wish was. The Buffalo Bills have traded wide receiver Stefon Diggs. Now, Chris, where were you when you found out about that?
Sleeping.
Okay, so you woke up and...
I had an alarm set for 12:15, and I must have grabbed my phone, shut it off, and then fell back asleep, and then I woke up at 1:30. And then I had a couple texts from you, Eric Harris, Jason Hicksonbaugh, Greg Zahn.
Greg Zahn still texts you?
Yeah, he does.
How long has it been since you worked with that guy?
God, 10 years, I think.
10 years?
10
and he
years.
Still texts you whenever anything bad happens with the Bills just to try to air his grievances?
Yeah,
I'm not going to lie. If the guy wasn't such an idiot, I'd like his dedication to the bit.
He didn't say anything fancy.
Of course not.
Oh, he said, big baller Beane fucking shit up, tanking for the new stadium. Trading Diggs is tanking. We're tanking now.
Oh, and this is it. We're gonna get into all of this. I was at a meeting at work. I've been in meetings most of the day. Onboarding a new employee, having some integration training, giving overviews of the company, really getting into some things. And as I'm literally in the middle of a PowerPoint, my phone starts going off on the table. And first it was like, the differentiation. Like once you hear enough of them, there's a different vibration pattern, since I don't use ringtones, between a Facebook Messenger notification, a Twitter notification, and a text message. Somehow I was getting at least 2 to 3 of each, like every couple minutes. And it got to a point where the two young people who I'm talking to in this meeting, and I'm going, like, someone was like, is there a problem? So do you need to take that? Like what? And I was like, I don't need to take that. Whatever it is, it can wait. I turn and then I see a phone call from Doug Roloski and I go, all right, either someone's dead or that's what this is all. And I pull up my phone and before I can answer his phone call, I see the preview of the first text message and it's just like, what the hell is Brandon Beane thinking trading Stefon Diggs? And I just put the phone face down. I was like, no, we will not be taking any of this right now. I have to, it's almost like I can't allow myself to even stare down that rabbit hole because I'm trying to be a professional here for a few minutes. I have to Jekyll and Hyde. The version of me that no one believes would like cruel pranks on other people. There's this separation of church and state. I have to maintain this or else everything falls apart. It was one of the, I think, most unexpected things of the 2024 offseason for any football team, and I don't think that's hyperbole. Do you?
No.
And obviously, the news was met with well-reasoned and patient reactions from the rest of the fan base, right?
I can't stop! Help! There's a cliff! And your family screaming, oh my God, we're burning alive! No, I can't feel my legs! In comes a meat wagon! Woo, woo, woo. And the medic gets out and says, oh my God.
Chris, that was Bill's Twitter today. Mm-hmm. That's social media right there. That is the sound of Buffalo Bills fans losing their collective shit. And it's hilarious. I appreciate it. I appreciate the enthusiasm that we have for our football team. It was rough out there today, huh?
Yeah.
Social media was not a friendly place to most people, and I think that's where people go nowadays to just vent their frustrations. So obviously, Twitter, Facebook, every outlet available, other people's DMs, text messages, Facebook messages. I bet you there was some guy who logged onto his MySpace for the first time in 15 to 20 years just to write a post about how the Bills have upset him that Stefon Diggs has been traded. What came before MySpace? Do you remember?
The telephone.
I feel like there was another website, though. Like, I remember hanging out with some of the emo kids in college, and there was another website that preempted MySpace and preempted Facebook, and its name is escaping me. LiveJournal. LiveJournal.com. Somebody reactivated that nonsense just to write a post about how this hurt them deeply, and then write some lyrics about how they're putting on eye black, and it's awful. Everybody's out there living, kind of swimming in their emotions socially. And it's weird that I watch all these different camps start to form. Like, first of all, it's hilariously flawed thinking to try to paint this in, like, to try to cope and with the idea that the team will be better without Stefon Diggs. And then also, if you're on the other side of the equation and trying to scream into the ether about how the sky is falling and the Bills will never win another football game again and that the franchise is doomed, it's like most fringe mindsets, whether it's politics, whether it's social issues, whether it's sports. Chris, those are probably the most unlikely to be correct, right?
Yeah.
So in that way, they're just terrible bandwagons to jump on. You have gentlemen like this, a Facebook post. The Bills have now lost Diggs, White, Poyer, Morse, Davis, Floyd, and Hines. To say that this is a rebuilding year is an understatement. Some had to go, but Diggs for a second-round pick in 2025, embarrassing. Beane and McDermott are obviously incapable of running a team. Meanwhile, they're asking Bills season ticket holders to pay upwards of $10,000 for PSLs. Disgusting. And they did the Trump thing where they said they made their statement and then went ... Disgusting. It's gross. Chris, that guy had, like, I understand his premise, but why do you think he felt the need to throw Nyheim Hines into that conversation.
I have no idea what that was about.
And then to try to tie it to the fact that they're asking you to charge $10,000 for PSL when we've talked about it. We just did a whole show on the PSL valuations and how this is going to go and how everyone needs to calm down. Like, this just seems like a guy who was already mad and just found something else to get mad about, right? Because now he's just windmilling. He probably just went online and said, hey, who did we lose this season? Oh, with his two-finger typing, because that's what people do on Facebook. Like, if you're posting on Facebook still, like, first of all, I know you're not doing it from a cell phone, right?
Yeah.
He typed that shit with 2 fingers. That's how he came up with that list of players, and that's why I'm not giving him a second thought. At the same time, you've got, like, Michael Partham was kind enough to find and tweet out a screen grab of this tweet. Aaron Cromer, the Bills' offensive line coach, Brooke Cromer responds to the Ian Rappaport tweet about the Bills trading away Diggs and says, good riddance with a peace sign. There's always a reason and always a plan. Hashtag trust the process. First of all, where were you when your husband was fighting teenagers over beach chairs?
I believe that's his daughter.
Or his daughter? Good. Where were you? Why weren't you fighting those kids instead of your father doing it? Second of all, do you think that her father really shares his frustrations with his employees, with his daughter? And if so, it's possible, right? Like, maybe he comes home and he's like, God, this fucking Diggs guy. We're having success running the ball, incorporating the running backs. Like, we've got a plan, we're sharing the ball, and he's just in every meeting causing a ruckus.
Or you're on vacation with your family, and then somebody else from the team calls Aaron Cromer, and you just hear Aaron Cromer's part of the conversation on the phone complaining about Diggs. That's how I looked at that Brooke Cromer tweet. She just heard her dad talking to somebody on the phone from the Bills, and that's how she formed her opinion.
Which, again, leads to more questions. Because, again, this is a very polarizing topic. And it's also, it's not polarizing. We talk about pranks and how sometimes being mean can be fun. There is nothing polarizing about watching the internet at large just two-hand into a windmill tomahawk dunk over somebody. Like, when you see it happen, it's a thing of beauty. And regardless of who it is, you have to respect it, right?
Yeah.
So it was funny to see the Air Raid Hour guys over from Cover 1 not only get tagged by freezing cold takes for their chiding of Nate Burleson, when Nate Burleson kind of spoke on the Bills' Stefon Diggs drama and talked about some things he had been hearing behind the scenes. And just to watch Nate Burleson then come off the top rope with a bionic elbow and essentially say, the next time you want to chase internet clout by villainizing me over my opinion on the things that I know from the people I talk to, send me some chicken wings first.
Fuck you both. Your lives are so fucking pathetic. I ran a charity $15K to raise awareness for it, you fucking losers.
I mean, the guys handled it with aplomb. They did the thing. They were contrite. Which, Chris, what are you supposed to do?
I don't know a Bills content creator that had the opinion of Diggs is getting traded.
Sure, but
he was going to be $28 million to be here, or if you want to get rid of him, it's another $3 million more. So it made no sense to believe that the Bills were going to end up trading him. I can't believe they did it.
And this is the thing, right? You can't believe they did it. I can't believe they did it. But I'm not going to go online and say anything close to what those guys did, mostly because I don't, and I say this professionally to people too. I go, listen, I've said it in job interviews. I've said it to people I'm training for their current role. I go, look, it's a great business practice. Never speak in absolutes about things that you don't control absolutely. Always leave wiggle room because situations are always fluid and you never know what's going to happen.
Well, there's a reason that we took a huge left turn with our salary cap show. It was burn it all down.
Burn it all down.
And this surely adds to that.
Yeah, your boy over here. I demanded more dead money. Are you... I will toast to all of the dead money, Chris. We did it. We're here, baby. I was like, no, 26, that's 26 million. That's rookie numbers. You got to pump those numbers up. Turns out Brandon Beane was listening. Where are we at now? 50? Chris, if you want to take a look at Spotrac and go ahead and try to find me the dead money count where we sit today, we'll talk about that in a minute. And in a dynamic that I'm going to dissect a little bit later in the show, no one here, no one involved, no one listening to this podcast, no one speaking on it now is capable, truly, of separating their emotions from facts. And as such, no one involved should consider themselves an arbiter on the media's take is wrong, right? The air raid guys tried that and you saw what happened to them. Case in point, Ty Dunn in December wrote an article. Many of you characterized it as a hit piece. I understand where that emotional reaction comes from. Chris, if you want to throw that up there for me. What I like about it, right, is that when you look at it, all he did was tweet out an excerpt from an article he wrote. So he already understands, like, you guys didn't like this. But at the same time, here it is. And for what it's worth, you know, this is something that we talked about with an anonymous source. For those of you who aren't watching on YouTube, an ex-teammate on offense said that he knows for a fact Diggs does not enjoy playing for McDermott. Quote, I know Diggs, he said. Diggs wants to be able to do what he wants to do with OTAs and shit like that. Diggs is going to get his work in. The organization I'm at now understands that great players don't need you to babysit them to be great. Diggs wants to be great for Diggs. And when you question that, Diggs gets pissed off because that's testing his integrity and what he wants to be. And I definitely think that's where Sean fucks up. Now, that's from Tyler Dunn's December article about what was going on with Sean McDermott at the time behind the scenes and what former players and former employees were willing to say about the goings on. And if you go to that tweet and you look at the article or you look at the comments, it's exactly what you would expect. You know, somebody right at the top, you just couldn't wait to find an angle to dunk on McDermott. You're so lame. He's not dunking on McDermott. He's giving a quote from a person that he talked to behind the scenes. But as fans, we are not able to remove ourselves emotionally from the dissection of a person and the way that they do their job, or a set of circumstances, or the way an athlete that we happen to like might behave in conjunction with his other employees. Which, Chris, they're employees, right? They're all employees of a business.
Yeah.
The way this guy gets along with his fellow employees and the management structure, it might not be great. We lack the emotional ability to detach ourselves from that because you either go too far into the territory of that guy needs to just shut up and play football, or too far into the territory of the team screwed everything up and he's the one who's right because his attitude is his attitude and he should be allowed to be that way. Well, that's not how a business runs, right? I can be a high-performing employee for an organization, and at the same time, that organization cannot, unless everything's going to grind to a halt because I'm not there, that employee can tolerate a lot, but they can't tolerate everything. And yet everyone acts like Ty's the bad guy here. Meanwhile, Pete Prisco and Ben Albright also had opinions. Are they haters? Like, are they terrible people? Ben Albright, he just kind of shrugged at the concept. He goes, Diggs is a 30-year-old coming off the bottom 3 career season in yards per reception, target, and catch percentage. I'm not seeing how Bills fans are freaking out. They'll reset with a younger, cheaper wide receiver in the draft. But Chris, these are people who are emotionally detached. Diggs averaged 11.1 11.1 per catch. He's talking about yards. The lowest in his time with the Bills. He's also 30. I'm just stating facts. These are people who are emotionally divorced from the process. And yet here we are getting upset with a guy in Ty Dunn because everyone's already mad at him. So it's easy to be mad when the guy you don't like says something. Here are 2 individuals also pointing out, like, I don't understand why this is such a big deal. Like, yes, it's surprising, but it's not the end of the world, and I don't understand where all the vitriol and all the flailing is coming from. But when they say it, Chris, I guarantee you their mentions aren't filled with angry Bills fans, are they?
No.
No, because everyone was already mad at Ty. And I think he knows that, and I can appreciate it. And the reality is we're all upset at some level, or bothered by this, I should say, because it's unconventional. And when I say that, what I mean is this trade of Stefon Diggs defies traditional logic. When you look at our cap situation, everyone assumed next year would be the year that we dealt with the Stefon Diggs problem. Yep.
You want to see this number?
Well, hang on a second, because I'm going to set this up. Defies traditional logic, because our cap situation is such that we all felt we could get one more year of decent production. We move him around. We find a new role for him, whatever it might. Now, Chris, that's assuming that he was willing to accept a new role.
Yeah.
And that's something that nobody's talked about, and that's something that no fan who's mad about this is willing to talk about with themselves, is the idea that maybe they went to him and said, look, we're going to draft a wide receiver that we think can play the outside, and we're going to get another outside wide receiver prospect. And we're going to try to bring them up, and we think that given your diminishing age, diminishing physical skill sets, you're still very good. We just want you in the best position to play, and we think you're a better slot receiver. And he understands that slot receivers don't see the ball nearly at the target share that an outside true X wide receiver sees it. And so maybe he pushed back against that. Like, we don't know these things. These are all the inner workings of a marriage gone wrong. It's also the compensation when you go, wait a minute, for just a second round pick? Just a second round pick, that's all we got? We had to give up 2 other draft picks and a player. And we retained all of the money. And all we got was a second?
Better than the other wide receivers that have been traded.
Well, and this is the thing. But it defies traditional logic. It also defies traditional philosophy. Okay, like if I was going to talk about it like this. If you talk about how you build a football team, we knew that we were losing our Z wide receiver in Gabe Davis. We knew that he was leaving. And then he did, and no one was shocked by that. But now you've also let your X wide receiver go, and it's rare that you, as a pass-heavy football team, go out there and say, you know what I'm going to do? Is I'm going to have no experienced targets on the boundary. That is not traditionally how you build a Super Bowl-threatening football team, is it?
Yeah.
That's generally not how this works. And it also defies the culture that we thought we had understood here in Buffalo. How old is Josh Allen? He's on the show.
27, I believe.
27 when the season starts?
Yeah, let me click on his name.
Go find out how old Josh
27, 324 days.
Okay, so he'll be 28 when the season starts.
Yeah.
Okay. Stefon Diggs is 30. Your core is older, but they're not ancient. We believed that we had cultivated a core of players who were getting older, but were still functional. And they've carved out all of them. Except for one. Or except for one player. It's Josh Allen. The cheese truly does stand alone in this one. Like the guys who were here throughout the heyday of what we know to the Buffalo Bills to be today, the reason that there's so many, the reason that Bills Mafia exists, or at least in its current capacity with its current number of people, guys calling themselves fans and the way that we do, there's something to be said for the concept that, I don't know, like during the drought, Chris, how many people would admit to being Bills fans publicly? And if they did, it was kind of like that, yeah, I'm a Bills fan.
Yeah, not a lot.
We didn't have any swagger until a certain quarterback came along. Now, you could have put Stefon Diggs in any one of those teams and it wouldn't have mattered. You could have put Von Miller or Trey White or any one of the players we lost on any of those drought-era teams and it wouldn't really have made a lick of difference. You look at what we have now, and there's one player it all revolves around, and it's that guy. And I guess we thought that this was like, hey, because, Deion Dawkins, you see him writing letters to the Players Tribune talking about culture, and we're building a family here, and we're starting something big. And then just that was 2019, 2020. And then just a year or two removed from that, we're jettisoning the core of the football team. That's a tough one to swallow, isn't it? And I understand why these things that butt up against what we thought we understood, both about how our team viewed our cap situation, how our GM viewed our cap situation, how they viewed the players involved. We thought we understood them. And so when you get a reminder that the people that you thought you knew you don't, it leads to discord. Now, these are all emotions that we're talking about. I want to talk about some facts. First of all, Chris, what are we up to right now for dead money for this season?
$55 million.
They did it. By God, they did it. You know what I feel like when I see that number? For as much as I hate the way that we got here, I don't like the way that we got to this number. But I do like the fact, I feel like, what is that? Dan Aykroyd? Eddie, why am I asking you? You don't watch movies. Eddie Murphy, Dan Aykroyd.
When you said Dan Aykroyd, I thought you were going to talk about
trading places.
No.
And they screw over the rich guys at the end on the orange juice. And they go, we got you. We made millions. Now you're broke. We'll see you in hell. I feel like this is how Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd must have felt when they shut the machines off down on Wall Street. And at the same time, I feel bad about that because I know that it's for the best. I'm happy I was the person calling for it. I'm just not a huge, I'm not a huge fan of how we got here. Stefon Diggs has the 6th largest dead cap hit in NFL history, and he's the largest non-quarterback ever. Usually when you watch guys who leave giant dead money cap hits, what you see is those are all mistakes, right? Carson Wentz, Russell Wilson, those types of players are the guys on this list. The Bills' mistake was extending him and then trading him 1 year into this extension. If you want to criticize Brandon Beane for a lot of, there obviously is, the idiots on Facebook over here hunting and pecking their way to try to cry about how our GM has no idea what he's doing. The mistake isn't so much the trade. The mistake is the fact that you extended him in the first place if you thought he wasn't a permanent fixture on this football team. That's your mistake. If Brandon Beane has to take any medicine, it's that. Because, this guy's a 2-time All-Pro, a 2-time Pro Bowler. Giant money, a lot of cash involved, a giant cap hit. Chris, is this the largest trade? Stefon Diggs might go down as a piece of 2 of the largest trades of our adult lives.
Yeah.
With the Buffalo Bills. The acquisition and the subsequent trading away. It's wild to think that one player can be dealt away by that many franchises, right?
There's a thing that I see on Sportsnet's YouTube page, and they're quite addicting when it comes to NHL trades. I don't think the guy is there anymore. Steve Dangle did this thing called Trade Tree. So he would take Eric Lindros, that trade between Philadelphia and Colorado, and he'll break down each branch of the trade tree of they got this pick for Lindros, where did this pick go, branch it off, dice. I would love to see that with this. Who were the players that were used with the pick swapped for Minnesota, right? It was Justin Jefferson and whoever, and then also sending away Diggs. We're getting a Minnesota 2nd-round pick next year. What happens to the picks that we gave away? I would love to see in 5 to 10 years the Stefon Diggs trade tree of acquiring and sending out of Buffalo.
Well, it's interesting you talk about the trade itself and the picks. What is Minnesota? First of all, it's weird Minnesota was involved somehow in both legs of this. Like, we're getting Minnesota's pick.
Did Houston already have Minnesota's pick?
Yeah.
And I don't know what. Yeah. I don't know what trade that was.
I have no idea
how they got that.
I have no idea.
But you're gonna assume that Minnesota's Sam Darnold, really? That's gonna get it done in the NFC North.
Well, this is it.
So
we have a second round pick in 2025.
Projecting that to be a high second round pick.
They have no Kirk. They have no star running back. They have a kind of depleted defense. I mean, that could end up being a great pick. They're plus 8,000 to win the Super Bowl, according to BetMGM. They're plus 750 to win the NFC North, which is the worst odds by far. You have Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's the reason I was rooting, even though I hate the Chiefs, I couldn't root for the 49ers in the Super Bowl because I just couldn't wrap my head around the idea that Sam Darnold might get a Super Bowl ring before Josh Allen. I can't reconcile that. I'm happy, as much as I'm unhappy that it happened the way that it did, I'm not heartbroken because it kept that from happening. And now this guy is potentially going to go out there and be their starter. Maybe they're tanking for a quarterback they like next year. You know?
Here it is, right here. Slide this over, show you. Round 2, look at that. Minnesota trades a second-round selection as well as a 2024 second and a sixth-round selection to Houston in exchange for a 2024 first and seventh-round pick. So that's how Houston acquired Minnesota's second. And okay. That's where we get that for the Diggs trade.
Now, the funny thing is it's all over but the crying, right? It's all over. You can't bring them back. And yet I assume that that's going to go on for quite a while. Think about when the season rolls around, Chris.
Yeah.
Every time Josh Allen has a sub 300-yard game, all the people who have already made up their mind that this is the end of the world and that this trade is a mistake will emerge from the woodwork to wail and thrash and scream and throw expletives and insults. And they'll be forgetting that it happened 7 times last year. All of them before week 11. At a time that is like Chris, when you look at the 2023 Bills statistical chart, it's kind of a mess. Because early on in those seasons, like last season, we were feeding Stefon Diggs the ball. We talked about this. He averaged almost double-digit targets every week for the first 10 weeks leading right up until we fired Ken Dorsey. And when you go down the stretch and you look at passing yards, multiple 200-yard games, right? But there's a 300, a 350, and we were still struggling to pass the ball. We had a game, okay? A game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. We threw for 359. The week before that, we decimated the Dolphins, which was great, and Diggs had a great game. Outside of that, Chris, 169 against the Giants, but Diggs had 15, 16 targets?
Yeah.
You go back to the earlier weeks where Josh was only throwing for 200 and change. Diggs was seeing 9, 10, 11, 12 targets. And yet the passing performances weren't coming. And then down the stretch, the offense started putting up better total yards when you took Stefon Diggs out of the game. Call it what you want. Different play caller, different philosophy. But then at the same time, on the flip side of that, every time the Bills offense has a great showing, just as a whole, they put up a bunch of points, they rack up yards. The fans who already have bought into this mindset that, well, we're going to be better because we don't have a guy who's going to fade in the playoffs again, who's going to disappear one more time. I mean, Chris, that can't be understated, right?
Yeah.
The fact that when push came to shove, teams knew they could take away Stefon Diggs in the postseason, and it hurt us. It did. Because we didn't have enough variance, and at the same time, we were still trying to force him the football. Now, every time that they do well, there's going to be a bunch of Bills fans out there talking about how we've been on this since day one. We knew we were going to be fine. Everything's cool. Except that down the stretch when Diggs' production waned, Josh only had 2 300-yard games under Joe Brady, which isn't sustainable if you want to be a pass-heavy Super Bowl winning team. So you're going to have to kind of figure out what the hell it is you are and what you want to be. And you're going to do, like, I think our emotions sometimes are trumping the numbers and the reality in front of us. That's what's happening here. And so then all you're left to do is pick up from this and say, okay, it's over. We have to move on. But a lot of us can't help but try to sift through the tea leaves and the wreckage of things. Now, Chris, you and I have this in common.
Whores?
Well, I would say we've both been cheated on.
Yes.
Okay? I've been dumped. I don't know if, hey, strap yourself in for this one. I've been dumped quite a few times. I know that's hard for a lot of you to believe. I think that most adults, regardless of gender or age, can agree with me that they've had similar circumstances. And one thing I've found from failed relationships is that regardless of what some shitty TikTok therapist might tell you or what some cut rate psychologist who you're going to see on the weekends when you're like, I just have to get my life back on track. Regardless of what they tell you, it's probably not worth usually going back through the wreckage of a breakup to try to find actual meaning. And I'll tell you why. First of all, you as the person involved are not emotionally neutral. I mentioned this earlier. Because you're not emotionally neutral, you're not a good identifier of what is evidence of a problem. Right? Like, Chris, you could go back through your text messages with an ex who broke up with you. And you could find a million things where you're like, oh, see, here's an instance where she was being this, or that she took something I said the wrong way, or she was saying something. And the reality is someone with a neutral, with no skin in the game, could look at that and just see a normal conversation. You can't help yourself. That's the nature of things. Also, it's unlikely that if you do find things where you made a mistake, you're going to do anything about it. And let's call it what it is, people. We don't change. I don't change. We've had conversations with Bruce Nolan about this. When Chris and I took the Dark Factor of Personality test. It's like a 500 question questionnaire. And by the time you're done, it gives you, it's like, here's all the ways you're broken, and here's how in all these terrible personality traits and different levels of psychopathy, here's where you rank amongst everybody who took the test. Chris, I saved mine. I finished in the 97th percentile of most things except for greed. Greed was, in fact, it almost goes back to where we started. I love pranks because I'm not taking anything from you. But at the same time, I've got a lot of negative personality traits that are driving my desire to do these things to other people. That's probably bad, right? Those are probably signs of a maladjusted human being.
Oh, yeah.
Most of us, I was talking to Bruce Nolan from the Bruce Exclusive podcast about this, and he goes, I find those types of exercises unnecessary and unfulfilling because the reality is the information we're getting from them, unless we're going to act on it, it's not worth having. And he's right. I got that test years ago. I haven't taken any strides to fix any of it because I don't want to. I'm happy with myself. Most of us are that way. And so in that way, we're all sitting here angry about something, and while we're trying to figure out why, we don't care. We already have our minds made up and our hearts made up as to what we feel and think. And that makes us bad detectives on this. And the reality is sometimes, for no reason at all, a fit just dissolves, and there's nothing either person involved can do about it. I feel like that may be just where the Buffalo Bills ended up. Realistically, I think you end up in a place. You heard a lot from Brandon Beane today. He obviously had to speak to the media. He was quoted as saying some things like it wasn't a decision that they made lightly. it was interesting to hear him say that it was not all pros and cons, but that we made the move, so obviously we see some sizable pros. And then there was also this about the decision itself.
Steph's a very competitive guy, and I wouldn't want to change that for him. And I don't think that was something that when we acquired him, I think we were very aware of his competitive nature. But yeah, again, when you make a decision like this, it's generally, unless someone broke the law and did something very bad, it's generally not one thing. You're making the decision and you're considering all factors. You're getting different people's viewpoints. You're weighing all the pros and cons. It's not like there's all pros to doing it and zero cons. And obviously we did the move, so it's not all cons and no pros. You're looking at everything. You weigh it. Is it easy? Heck no. It's hard. Sometimes in this seat you got to make difficult decisions. And what I would, let everyone know is it's not lightly. It wasn't easy, but it was with a lot of thought, discussion, conversation, at the highest levels of our organization. And it was made what we believe was the best interest of the Bills. And I don't think we can go around and around. I don't think I could frame it any better. Certain things need to be kept in-house as far as how a decision was made or what all factors specifically. I think you just have to trust that this decision was made in the best interest of the Bills going forward.
Brandon Beane, BuffaloBills.com. Go watch his 20-minute presser. Some good stuff in there.
So there's a lot to take in there. First of all, when you hear something where he acknowledges, it's funny to hear him acknowledge Stefon Diggs' kind of intense nature. You don't bring that up unless it had something to do with the conversation. It's also interesting when you hear him say this decision was made at the highest levels, right? What are the highest levels? If he's the one saying that, it almost alludes to the fact that there was somebody with more authority in the franchise than him involved, correct?
Yeah.
This morning on WGR 550, as I was getting ready and driving to work, Paul Hamilton was on the radio talking about last night's hockey game. And he was reporting that Terry Pula and a bunch of other quote-unquote executives were in the building. Didn't know who. But he thought it was noteworthy that it was the first time Terry Pagula had been to a hockey game by him and by his and the rest of the media count. First time Terry Pagula had been at a game the entire season. And yet he wasn't in the box really with Kevin Adams. But they knew he was there. And that they stayed late into the evening. Terry Pagula and all these executives that he was there with stayed late into the evening, well after the game ended. And at the time, they were talking about the odds of whether they were there talking about what was going to happen with the future of Don Granato, whether they were talking to the coaching staff of the Sabres, and what could keep them there so long. And then you see this trade today. And I know people are like, oh, you're reading too much into this. But I go back to a quote from an article when the Bills traded away wide receiver Sammy Watkins when Brandon Beane first got here. There's a quote, right? These aren't easy decisions, Bills general manager Brandon Beane told reporters on Friday. I laid the trades out for owner Terry Pagula and coach Sean McDermott last night, and this was absolutely a we decision. That's him talking about trading away Ron Darby and Sammy Watkins. So it's a we decision. It's not a me when I have to make a giant move like this. I go to Terry and I go to Sean and we get together and we talk about these things. Chris, you have to believe that this was made with everybody's eyes wide open, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so then you think about, well, who else needs to greenlight something like this inside the franchise? If Terry was okay with it, Brandon was okay with it, Sean was okay with it, What about Josh Allen?
I have not talked to him since the move. No, he was on the West Coast, so it probably woke up to, whenever that move went down, he might have been asleep. But I'll circle back with him. But, Josh and I have a pretty regular conversation on things, and I think it's important for me to make sure if I think something could happen to make sure he's not blindsided. And so I would, without going into the discussion with Josh when the last time we spoke was I did alert him that, there had been some inquiries and it wasn't 100% off the table.
Josh Allen. Brandon Beane. More from his press conference. Go get it if you haven't seen it yet.
So Josh was made well aware that this was a possibility by Brandon Beane's own admission. But here's the thing. Considering how much he's already not saying, it's hard to believe that Allen didn't hear the news that it was a strong possibility, and also that his opinion didn't play a role. Now, for people who hear that and go, well, Josh wouldn't do that. Josh and him riding piggyback on Josh's shoulders on Nickelodeon magazine or whatever the fuck it was. They're thick as thieves, and Josh always says the right thing about how they're friends and that their relationship is great. Awesome. I'm happy that you have that. You know what I have? I have the NFL Network's top 100 player reactions to Josh Allen. And I also have Marcus Peters on a random podcast in 2021 outing him as one of the biggest shit talkers in the NFL. Right? In your face. This is a guy who on the football field between the lines will get in your ass. The one guy flat out on NFL Network, they were talking to him and they were like, oh, you and Josh Allen were jawing with each other a little bit during that game. What happened? What was said? And he goes, man, he's like, I can't even repeat it out loud. The stuff that man said to me, he goes, but he backs it up. He talks it, but he backs it up. And what you're talking about is this is a guy who's a Boy Scout when he has to be and an unbridled son of a bitch when he doesn't. And that Jekyll and Hyde nature, it's like the thing we were just talking about, right? It might be the only thing he and I ever will have in common, if we're being honest. But I like that. The reality is Josh isn't stupid. Josh recognizes what he is to this franchise, and he understands the pull that he has and also the position. He's not the CEO of the Buffalo Bills, but he's that highly effective employee who the company kind of has to defer to, right? There's the ones that you say, this guy's really good at his job, but ultimately we don't need him. And then there's the guy where you go, well, he's highly effective, and also if we don't cater to him, this whole thing will fall apart. Josh Allen's that guy. And so with that, you don't make moves like this unless you've also gotten that individual's input. Oh my God! Damn it, Chris! Oh, for those of you, Chris just put a meme. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're not, you're missing out. It's a clip of a very serious-looking Sean McDermott at the podium with a quote, "It's always tough to lose a star on your team. This is like when Al-Qaeda tragically lost Osama bin Laden." The internet is a wild place. I love meme culture. I love jokes. But man, I saw another one earlier today where it was like a picture of McDermott where him and Diggs were having like a spat on the sideline. And it was the quote like Sean McDermott in quotes, "There is no I in Al-Qaeda." It's bad, guys. These are all in poor taste. I understand. We're here having a conversation about something. But Josh isn't stupid. He knew that this was a reality. And if they pulled the trigger, it means they know that this isn't going to be the most upsetting thing in the world to their prized possession, because now he's all they have. Right? He cares so much. There's a quote. Okay? I bookmarked it or screenshotted it from a Pro Football Talk article. This is back it's earlier in the offseason when after we got rid of everybody and people were worried, and Brandon Beane met with the media and he was quoted as saying, yeah, he acknowledged the departures and then said, you have to have a franchise quarterback to be a consistent contender. So with that, I don't think our window is closing. There's changes, salary changes, draft changes, all the things as you evolve your roster. We had to go under the cap this year, go younger in some areas. It still all builds around the quarterback. That's a direct quote from the guy we just heard talking about how Josh Allen was kind of tuned into the fact that this could be a possibility. Sean McDermott is walking Ambien. He gives you nothing of value, even though we know he talks a lot behind the scenes. Thank you, Tyler Dunn. Brandon Beane is an NFL Executive of the Year, and a guy who trades up regularly in the NFL draft. Josh Allen is the guy who purports as a Boy Scout off the football field and is a menace on it. These are all men with good poker faces, and in a way, I'm not shocked that this has been going on behind the scenes and that this conversation has been brewing for a while. And I guess I'm even less shocked when I see this tweet from Joe Mixon. That's not something a lot of people know about, Chris. A lot of the angry fans. It sounds an awful lot like everyone trying to form their opinion on who's right and who's wrong and what happened doesn't actually understand the full context of this. And maybe we never will, but here's a tweet from Joe Mixon from earlier today. Chris, you want to go ahead and throw that up there for me? Because I'm going to have to, there's emojis. I can't. Where are we with this?
Yeah, give me one second. Pull that back up.
So, guys, it almost sounds like there was a little home cooking going on here ahead of this trade. Joe Mixon, who was released and then signed with the Houston Texans, tagged Stefon Diggs in a tweet today at 11 a.m. and said, at Steph Diggs, just a few weeks ago, you asked and we delivered. Now let's go get these rings. Hashtag H-Town Takeover. You asked? Chris, he asked, right?
So he has to be traded.
So knowing that these guys keep everything under wraps and knowing that Diggs is cryptic and weird on social media, but it's wholly conceivable that this player was flat out saying, listen, you trade me or else. And they're saying, okay, but don't make a fucking deal out of it, because if you do, it's going to spoil things and we can't get the proper return and we will make you stay here. Is that not a reasonable conclusion to draw from all this?
Yeah.
And so here we are. Right? Here we are. Left to just pick through the wreckage and deal with what comes next. That leaves us with the long view of the decision. And honestly, I want to start by asking, why is it that every guy who wears the number 14 here, ever since Frank Reich, seems to leave with some kind of acrimony and BS attached to it? Why? I mean, let's go back over it. Frank Reich. Frank Reich got to leave and go be the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers, I think in their inaugural season. Was he or was he not their starting quarterback, Chris?
That's true.
Okay. Ryan Fitzpatrick. Ryan Fitzpatrick is the quarterback here in Buffalo wearing number 14. That was the birth of Bills Mafia. You know, out of the doldrums of the late 2000s, he invigorates this fan base and finally gets people to pay attention. Everyone's like, oh my God, the Bills. Look at the Bills. This is fun again. The Bills are doing something. He gets unceremoniously dumped off the roster after Doug Marrone took over the team, expecting to have a veteran quarterback here. That'll be one of the things that I always wonder about Doug Marrone. Would Doug Marrone have broken the drought during his time here if he had not had to deal with a rookie quarterback and Kyle Orton?
Maybe.
If you had given him Ryan Fitzpatrick the way he thought, he's talked about it. You can go ahead, try to fact check me. He has mentioned how when he took the job in Buffalo, it was with the acknowledgement that he thought Ryan Fitzpatrick was going to be his quarterback. And then they dumped Ryan Fitzpatrick and drafted E.J. Manuel, and that was his lot. And so the fact that he got them to a 9-7 record the first winning record we'd had in a long time. That, in and of itself, seemed like a Herculean thing. Ryan Fitzpatrick here could have made a difference. And I'll never understand the front office decision-making. Like, why then? Also, why not draft a quarterback who you know is raw and probably not capable of starting right away? And why not let him sit? Then you get wide receiver Sammy Watkins, the next number 14 to wear the jersey. So everybody went and got every cheapskate out there who didn't want to buy a new Stitch jersey went to Al Ross or some other place here locally and got the nameplate cut off and had a new one sewn on. It had Sammy Watkins on it. And they go, look at that. For $45 of the work, I saved myself $100 and something in a brand new Sammy Watkins jersey. And then after a couple disappointing seasons with a lot of injuries involved and some just lackadaisical stuff, apparently during the time in his life where he thought he was a lizard from space, right?
Yeah.
And he talked about how he was just out Chippewa getting fucked up all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somewhere in there, we lost our organizational patience and shipped him off to L.A. for a second-round pick and E.J. Gaines. In comes wide receiver Stefon Diggs, and everyone goes, hell yeah, I still have my 14 jersey, baby. I can take the nameplate. It lives. And they put Diggs on the back of it. And those jerseys sell for hundreds of dollars for the last 5 years. And now every single one of them are worthless. And so now we have to sit here and wait for another poor son of a bitch to take the number 14 and hopefully not fall into the same hole. Chris, do we just retire that number?
Can't.
I think you have to.
No.
You have to get that thing out of the fucking rotation. Dude, you're bad luck Schleprock. That number is a bad penny. You can't have it around. Get 14 out of here.
What'll happen is we got Trubisky this year.
Do we make him take 14?
No. Then next year we get a new backup quarterback and it's Jake Fromm and he wears 14. That's how we rectify that.
The Watkins scenario actually worries me too as I sit here and I think about what's coming next. Because if you think about the machinations of how we ended up with Sammy Watkins, in a class that was loaded at wide receiver, Odell Beckham Jr., Mike Williams, who else got drafted that year?
Mike Evans, that's what I mean. Mike Evans. Chris, give it a goog. There was a number of wide receivers who got drafted who went on to be prolific, and most of them still are prolific. Is that also the Kelvin Benjamin draft?
It might have been. Was it? I don't know. You're going to have to tell me. So you go through this in a draft, and of course the Buffalo Bills are the team that trade to the top of everybody.
Correct. Kelvin Benjamin.
So if you could throw that up there on the screen for me, just so I can see what we're looking at here. Clinton Dix. Wow, that's a pull. Let's see, what do we got here? Yeah, so Sammy Watkins at number 4,
first wide receiver off the board,
followed by Mike Evans, followed by Odell Beckham Jr.,
Brandon Cooks,
who has gone on to have 1,000-yard seasons with every team he's played. But scroll up a little bit.
Kelvin Benjamin's next.
Okay, so Kelvin Benjamin,
Marquise Lee,
Jordan Matthews,
Paul Richardson,
yeah,
Devontae Adams. Is he good?
Yeah, I don't know.
Cody Latimer, Allen Robinson,
Jarvis Landry.
The list goes on.
So you traded up in a wide receiver heavy draft to take the best, and you didn't end up with the best. You ended up with a guy who wasn't mature enough to be a professional. And the problem with that is that it set you back again. And then you were still just rebuilding while other franchises like Tampa Bay still have Mike Evans. He's still out there putting up prolific seasons for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, regardless of who their quarterback is. Odell Beckham Jr. is still finding work in the NFL because he's a talent at the wide receiver position. You know, he's got a Super Bowl ring now.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I hope that we're not lining ourselves up for the same mistake that we made before. Ultimately, the crux of this trade and the thing that I can see that the front office was after, and I understand it, is flexibility. The ultimate, he talked about a lot of pros and cons, and that there had to be more pros. Brandon Beane said there had to be more pros because there was, obviously they made the move, and the discussions kind of brought it about. You have untold options at your fingertips. By adding an extra second-round pick, you have now weaponized next year's first. If your intent is to make a jump up this year's draft board to go get a falling wide receiver talent that you like, or to say, hey, we already know that we need to get ahead, so we'll take our extra second, our first, for next year's first, next year's extra second, we're going to move up, trade this year's first, and also some of the other draft capital we have on down the board. And we're going to move up in kind of like what would have to be like a Julio Jones-esque trade, which I think was moving from 27 to 6, if I have that correctly.
I don't think that would be that necessary based on the projection of the wide receiver group as a whole, which we'll eventually get to with Schofield.
We'll get to Schofield and Geary in a joint podcast that's going to take an hour and a half, and it's going to be a lot of Geary and Schofield yelling at each other. It's going to be awesome. It's almost like that thing where I want to get the two of them in a... It's like when you put two crayfish in a bucket and you just tap the sides enough, they'll fight.
Yeah.
I guarantee you I can do that with them. I'm calling my shot now. But with that said, you've given yourself the flexibility that if you think you need to make... If there's a guy you like so much that you think he's your Julio Jones, and you think you can have him for 4 years without paying him, you make that trade and you have the ammunition to do it without totally derailing both drafts. Right? A first, a bunch of mid-round a bunch of our other picks on down the draft board this year.
Nate was in for Shope today.
I listened to a little bit of that.
I listened to a little bit going to pick up pizza tonight. One of the things that Geary mentioned, which I don't think he came up with a name, but is there a Cordy Glenn on the roster? Someone that you can trade to move up a little bit within the first round. And I'm not sure that we...
I don't think we have
think we have that.
No, we just let go all of our core. All of the guys who were household names are gone. You've now reached a point... I mean, unless you're talking about trading a Matt Milano, in which case you're out of your minds.
Yeah.
They can't do that. Although now we've learned that anything is possible. I saw it on Twitter today. A guy named Merck, he tweeted it out. He's pretty active in the Bills Twitter thing. He goes, everybody talks about how trades are not possible. This isn't possible. He goes, all it takes is 2 GMs and 1 interested player. 1 player who wants a trade and 2 teams that are willing to make a deal. And that's what we have here today, is a player who no longer, I think he's happy, right? Because in that same interview, if you go back and listen to it over at BuffaloBills.com, Brandon Beane talks about how he talked to Stefon Diggs after the trade and that things were good. It almost makes it sound like this is what he's been angling for a while, and they finally found a way to maximize the value that they could get back. They finally found a taker. Okay, you went off the bus? Well, I got to find a good place to drop you off. We found it. So now you have this, and you can weaponize that capital and move up and get the talent that you think you need to replace him, or you can use it to continue backfilling things. You've also given yourself future cap flexibility. Chris, go. I saw you had 2026's cap table up. What are you looking at here?
Yeah. Estimated cap space.
$79 million. Estimated cap space, $79 million in 2026. Rookies will cut into that. But there's a world we live in where if you go through this year still competitive, compete, get younger players in here, and then you go into this, like next year it's $45 million. The year after...
46.
46.
If you want to round up.
The year after, it jumps again to 79. You're talking about a team that has now a lot of runway in front of it. And they say, we can rebuild this team pretty quickly through free agency, through trades. We've got everything at our disposal. Also, if you want to completely rebuild altogether and just stack this thing with rookies and then go out into the undrafted free agent market in 2025, you could do that. You can do it again in 2026 because of this newfound cap flexibility. Or you just keep building through the draft and you weaponize that cap space and say, we'll take on some trades of players where we get picks in exchange for our cap space. We can do all of these things, and Brandon Beane can go back to being the baller that we know him to be, that earned him that moniker to begin with. Everybody loved Big Baller Beane when he was finding ways to swing deals for guys like Matt Milano, and you go, how did we keep this all-pro talent from hitting the market? Oh my God, he swung Deion Dawkins and Dawson Knox, which we now know is a mistake. How did he go out and get Von Miller, which was working right up until he got hurt? How did he do this? How did he do that? How did he reshape the 2017 Bills through a series of aggressive trades that took us from 0 to hero and got us into the playoffs and broke the NFL drought? Because he's got balls. And the guy, whether you love him, hate him, you don't like the direction, you don't like the decisions, at the end of the day, he's got a vision. And I'll tell you what, having worked in enough companies that have no vision and no ability to execute at the same time, it's a terrible place to live. Because you can walk around talking about all the things that should be better, and then it never gets better. It's like the teams in our division who walk around talking about how their offensive lines, man, if we could just do this and we can fix that, and you know on its face it should get done, and then it never happens. It never materializes. Because the GM goes, well, this team jumped us in the draft. This happened, that happened, and we didn't end up landing the right draft prospect, and then the board didn't fall our way, so we didn't end up with a cap-solvent offensive line. And then there just weren't offensive linemen who wanted to come here in free agency unless we wanted to overspend, so we didn't get one. And then you end up with the Miami Dolphins. Then you end up with the New York Jets. This is a guy who has shown you he can build a team from nothing to something. And yet everybody's out here trying to decry that Brandon Beane has lost his mind. Forget Sean McDermott for a minute. He'll coach the players. This is a team-building, roster-building thing. And while McDermott has some input, these are Brandon Beane's decisions. And if anything, the pressure now falls squarely on Brandon Beane more than it ever has. Because he now has to prove that his rebuild of the Buffalo Bills from pretender to contender wasn't a fluke. And that he can now quickly retool this roster by identifying savvy draft choices, by making smart moves in free agency on the cheap for the time being, and then when our future cap space becomes available, using it wisely. But everyone's going to wonder about what could have been. Like everyone's right, Chris?
Yeah.
And the idea is you want to be known for your hits more than your misses. The Buffalo Bills have made a lot of hits, but with fans and with the national media and with the football landscape, it doesn't matter till you get that ring. And in that way, until you hoist the Lombardi, nobody gives a shit all of the nice things you've done that made you an also-ran. He's going to get a second bite at the apple here to try to prove that he can quickly tear down and rebuild a roster. And I don't know. The next 2-3 years are going to tell a lot about where this whole franchise is headed. It's going to be highly interesting. I don't know who I believe. I don't know if I'm angry. I don't know if I'm sad. I don't know if I trust him to do it or not. One thing I do know, Chris, if you look at the DraftKings Sportsbook, who's the odds-on favorite to win the AFC East right now?
Buffalo Bills plus 160.
That's funny. I'm on the FanDuel Sportsbook, and the Buffalo Bills plus 160. And I bet if you go to the BetMGM Sportsbook, the Buffalo Bills are still plus 160. Maybe even a little better. At the end of the day, we have the thing that nobody else does. Yes, there will be bumps in the road. This is gonna get, it's not going to, nothing goes perfectly, right? If it does, Jesus Christ, Chris, if they manage to fix this all in one offseason and we all of a sudden go and win a Super Bowl, it would be the most improbable thing ever, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah.
But with that said, it doesn't mean that things can't improve while you're taking what are perceived like steps backwards. I've learned my lesson with that. My memory's long. It's kind of a flaw. I'm petty. I hold on to grudges. I remember everything. So I remember where I was when the Bills were perceivably tearing down what was a team that just, oh my God, a new coach came in and he's tearing the roster apart and we're tearing down to the studs and nobody's going to go to these games and blah, 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 blah. And then they use that pared down, torn down roster to limp into the playoffs. I don't know. I think with a better quarterback, we're capable of more than that. I think with better coaching, I think with some growth of the kids in the roster, we're better than that. And at the same time, I wish all the best to Stefon Diggs. Don't you? Like, maybe he's found a fit. This is a football team in Houston that has Nico Collins, who is this big, physical, fast, outside wide receiver threat. He's got a lot of juice. They've got a veteran running back. They've got a decent offensive line. They've got a lot of things that are working for them. And then you've got this farewell tweet from him, right? The amount of love and respect I have for the city of Buffalo, 4 of the best years of my life. The city welcomed me with open arms. I'm forever grateful for you and all the Buffalo Bills organization. Something special was built over those years with some very special men that will always have a place in my heart. Bills Mafia, so many great memories created throughout the years. Those games are crazy because of you. Sadly, good things come to an end. And until we meet again, number 14. And that's it. That's the end of the chapter, dude. We turn the page to a whole new era of Buffalo Bills football where this team is going to get built from the ground up around players that we can't even name right now. I don't know how to feel. I just know that some of you who have already made up your mind on how to feel you're out of it. You've lost it. You've lost the plot. You can do whatever the hell you want with all the information I just laid out. At the end of the day, it's just a game, guys. It's just a game. People come and go. We have the most important position figured out, and we have a GM who seems to understand what it takes to stay on top of the ball. I mean, I can only imagine, Chris, what our fan base would be saying if this was the Patriots. Remember when Richard Seymour and, think about the Patriots, Chris, and all the ways that they handled things. Hey, all the way the Patriots just shuffled off their veterans and let them go.
Yep.
Rather than give them second contracts, rather than extend them. The shrewdness. Welcome to it, because sometimes this is what it takes to stay on top. And if that's it, I'm willing to at least hold my breath and wait. Hopefully some of you join me. Now, Chris, say it with me. A goose fraba. Guys, I love you all, but we got to get out of here. I'm Drew Gear. That's Chris Kruger. And this has been a wild Rockpile Report.